While I recall specific images at times when I'm creating shapes on the canvas, what's still paramount for me when I'm working is working with visual language in the most abstract sense of working with color, shape, form, texture, rhythm, balance, all the core elements of visual language are what's dominant finally in my thought. It's like in a line of music, if you have a certain voice, an alto voice or whatever, and you develop the story for that voice, and then the next voice is some kind of response to the first voice. Well, that's how I'm using the colors. So each color will have its own movement throughout the canvas, and to be able to read. I mean, this is the theory. How it comes out, I don't know, but that's how it's the premise I'm starting with. And in the first painting, you can see that fairly clearly. On this one, I don't know whether, because it's going to be more dense, it will be there, but whether it'll be easily readable in that manner, I don't know. Because after going through with each color and developing the painting, then I end up going back into it, repeating some of those colors on another layer. Now I'm changing the angle of descent as well. Just trying to stagger the marks. I had large going to small and then small going to large. Maybe I'll, for the moment, just try to keep these three roughly the same. Things that are more simple in form, like large buildings, don't stimulate me as much, at least as an isolated form. But as a group of forms, then they create the kind of patterns that I'm interested in. Working in front of people as opposed to working by myself in the studio is a different experience in many ways. One of the differences is that the length of time to make a decision gets pushed or shortened because I know people are watching, and so I take fewer breaks to think things over. I sort of force myself to make a decision more quickly. And the very fact that I want to look like I know what I'm doing actually makes me more acute in my thinking. I think I run through the process faster, and then I don't stop to fiddle around with other things in my studio. I just keep working steadily. When I'm here by myself, I can stop and put on another CD and answer the phone and get sidetracked. Before I start, I think about how I'm going to begin, and I think of different possible ways I might begin, including what color I want to begin with. But up until the moment that I really put the brush on the canvas, I usually haven't made up my mind entirely. But I was thinking about this, the idea of a rhythm, establishing a rhythmical pattern earlier this morning, and decided I wanted to try these triplets, marks that would be in groups, 3 marks in groups of 3s, and then within that I'm sort of inverting the order. So in the first group, the largest mark is on top, and then as they descend, they get a little smaller. Whereas on this one, I'm trying to change the angle of descent and also reverse the large to small. But I don't have other than the fact that small starting idea, plus the idea that I want to make it more dense and more layered than the first painting, those are the only real specific ideas that I have consciously. But since I've been thinking about it for a while, sometimes the ideas are developing subconsciously, show up only when you're working. And then I wonder where they came from. So on the top, I've got the large mark closest to the top, and then the reverse, the small mark, starts further down. So then I'll try to change that relationship at the bottom too by having the large mark at the bottom closer to the bottom edge. When I'm working on the painting, I'm thinking about the nature of the shape or the nature of the color or the relationship of one to another rather than the literal source material. Well, working on a large scale scale is relative, so I've worked pretty large before, but this is the biggest scale by about, I think I did a big drawing that was this long, but only half this high. But the difference is that you're working within the piece instead of working on the piece. So I just used a larger gesture. It's an intellectual challenge to think on a different scale, and it breaks old habits. Working in public occasionally because it's a change, and it's also another way of sharing what I'm doing. Hanging the finished paintings up is the most common way of sharing my work, but I think it helps people understand the work to see it being made, at least in some cases. Some kinds of work it's really not very informative, but in this kind of work I think you can tell a lot by seeing it under construction. I was beginning, actually I can see traces of this work evolving in the very late 80s, although it wasn't the dominant feature of my work. A work that had what looked like maps and roadways or aerial views of things. And it was also possible to read this work as if it were ironwork seen around the city, like the elevated structures or cranes, electromagnetic cranes in scrap yards, railway yard equipment, bridges. And I think both my background in city planning and then my visual interest in pattern and my interest in this region, because it's a place that I grew up, led me to interpret these paintings as coming from the environment in which I was living. And I thought of this as my attitude about the region as a romantic attitude. So the title just gradually evolved in my head. It was a number of years before I actually started labeling this work Inland Romance. So I think the series doesn't officially begin perhaps until '93, but there are earlier works that I would still categorize as part of that. Most of the Inland Romance series has been a bit tighter. So while some of the vocabulary is the same in these recent pieces, in the last year and a half I've broken things apart, so there's a much looser organization, looser appearance to the work that I still like to continue the title because I feel like the source material is still the same. Still call it Inland Romance. But you'll see bits and fragments of these earlier paintings scattered throughout the work. But it's not a continuing pattern in the same way that it was. So a section that looks like a hieroglyphic or a map or a path in the past that might have created a pattern across the entire canvas with one color. Now you'll just see sections of it used as individual elements throughout a composition, but not continuously.